Alright guys, so hope you didn't think I'd leave you hanging with Julius Caesar all by yourselves. So we're gonna go ahead and do a little discussion, and by discussion I mean me talking about Act 4 of Julius Caesar. So let's kind of run through this whole thing. As you know, Caesar's dead, Antony gives a great speech, love Antony. Anyway, Brutus and Cassius flee, Antony meets up with Octavius. Now we kind of have these two camps of people getting ready to vie for power of Rome. So now that's kind of where we see ourselves. We open Act 4, Scene 1 with Antony and Octavius. They're talking all about the people that they're adding to their list that they're gonna kill, people that have to die, and it's like, oh, hey, Antony, your nephew has to die, and he's like, well, if he does, he does. Oh, Lepidus, your brother has to die. He's like, okay. So everyone's really on board with this whole thing. So Antony, Octavius, Lepidus, they're all working together as a triumvirate, which is like a group of 3 people who are ruling Rome. But as soon as Lepidus leaves, they send him on an errand. Antony immediately starts talking bad about him. He really doesn't care for Lepidus. He thinks he likens him to an ass, telling him that he's only good enough to go on errands and bear heavy loads for them. Meanwhile, we get the best insult of this entire act, which is when, Octavius is like, but I thought, he says he's a tried and valiant soldier, and Mark Antony replies, so is my horse. Which is pretty great. I love that. I love that a lot. And that's basically the end of that scene. It's a little scene. We see some kind of disconnect between them. They're not really a unified front, but they are still going to work together to battle Brutus and Cassius, and that's who we see in the next scene. So Act 4, Scene 2. We have Brutus and Cassius. Well, right now we just have Brutus. He's talking to Lucilius, who's Cassius's, servant, asking him how Cassius seems lately. Lucilius says that Cassius was, perfectly civil to him, but that he's been not quite as friendly as he used to be. And Brutus says that's exactly what he's worried about. It sounds like a warm friend cooling, he says. Meanwhile, Cassius rides up and immediately starts some beef with Brutus. He jumps off his horse and he says, most noble brother, you have done me wrong. And he kind of starts to argue with Brutus, but Brutus says, let's go inside the tent. Our men don't need to see us argue here. Let's go talk about this in private. And so that's exactly what they do. So, real short scene, not a lot happens there, but it does lead us directly into Scene 3. Now, Scene 3, we get to see why Cassius is mad, but Brutus is mad too. They're actually both mad at each other. So Cassius is mad because he vouched for someone who Brutus says took bribes, which is basically the same thing as Brutus saying Cassius took bribes, and in fact Brutus even tells Cassius he has an itching palm, which, kind of a low blow, but also is it above Cassius? Is it? I don't think it is. So anyway, they argue. Cassius tells Brutus to stop arguing with him, you're not gonna like me when I'm angry, don't think we're such good friends that I won't kill you, kind of talk, big Cassius talk. Brutus calls him a madman. He also uses the word choleric to describe him. Choleric should bring to mind the idea of usually a child, like a baby, has cholera, they cry a lot, so he's basically calling him a whiny baby. And then they argue over semantics, something about Cassius saying he was an elder soldier. No, you said you were a better soldier. It's a whole weird argument that's going, sideways at this point. And then Brutus pulls out the Caesar card and he says, you would never have done this to Caesar, Cassius. And Cassius gets real mad about that, and then Brutus jumps in and explains why he's mad at Cassius. And he's mad at Cassius because he wrote to him asking for money to pay his troops. He has these men, they're hungry, they need to get paid. And Cassius said no. Cassius explains this away by saying that the messenger who brought that message to him was wrong. He actually totally said yes, definitely was going to give him some money, and that's all a great big misunderstanding. And so Cassius is beside himself at this point, and he basically tells Brutus that if he was a good friend, he would, and sorry while I look for this quote, he says that a good friend would bear his infirmities, but Brutus makes mine greater than they are. And Brutus then gets kind of melodramatic, and he starts talking about how, you can't ignore someone's faults when they're as big as Mount Olympus, which is kind of dramatic for Brutus. Then we get Cassius doing his melodramatic thing, which, we're used to. He basically says he wishes Antony would show up right then and there and kill him. And then he takes his dagger out and hands it to Brutus and is like, here you go, kill me. Might as well kill me if you don't love me. Very classic Cassius fashion. This should be nothing new. And that's kind of when Brutus sort of deflates and he realizes that he was too quick to anger. They both kind of apologize to each other. They become friends again. And this random poet then, bursts into the tent and, making a big deal about, no, our lords are fighting. They can't be fighting, my lords. And basically Cassius is like, okay, get out, we're friends, go. So he does, he gets out. They decide that they're going to camp there for the night, and so Brutus and Cassius start talking again. Cassius tells him that he didn't know that Brutus could get so angry. He's a pretty mild-mannered guy. And Brutus says that he's sick of many griefs. And one of those griefs is Portia is dead. That's right, his wife is dead. And remember, at this point, Cassius is Portia's brother, so there is a family tie there, and Cassius is now really sad about this too. But here's what happens. So Portia kills herself. Last time we saw Portia, she was already kind of freaking out because she knew the plot against Caesar. She knew what Brutus was going to go and do, but it still scared her for him and for Rome. So she was freaking out the last time we saw her. Now she's killed herself. She's killed herself because, one, Brutus has fled Rome. She can't see him anymore. She can't get to him. Also because Antony and Octavius are growing in power and they're doing things like murdering lots of people, which makes her nervous. And so basically she swallows hot coals and dies. And that's how that goes. So anyway, but Brutus kind of brushes this whole thing off. He doesn't really want to talk about it. Now is not the time for grief. He'll deal with it later. Then, they hang out and they drink some wine. Then some more soldiers come in and they talk about Mark Antony and Octavius and the number of people they've killed. They're like, we've heard they killed 100 senators. And Brutus is like, my letter says they only killed 70. But regardless, they're murdering people in Rome. They're getting rid of a lot of the government in Rome. And then one of them tries to tell Brutus that his wife is dead, which Brutus obviously already knows, and he basically says that there will be a time to mourn her later. But again, he kind of wants to push it aside. He doesn't really want to talk about it. And that's when they talk about moving on to Philippi the next day. Cassius wants them to stay where they are and have the enemy come to them. He doesn't want to expend the resources to go to Philippi to meet Mark Antony and Octavius. Brutus, on the other hand, wants to go forward. He doesn't want to have the battle take place in this sort of middle ground where a lot of people are going to get caught up in it. He also doesn't want the other side to gain any more people, and he's afraid that if they have to pass through some more towns and villages to get to them, that they'll collect more people on their side. So he says they're going to meet them at Philippi, and as you probably should know by now, Brutus gets his way, so they're going to go to Philippi. They agree to go and do that. So Cassius agrees, and then he leaves the tent. They all go to bed. Brutus has some guards brought in to come and sleep in his tent, and then he has Lucius play some music for him while he tries to read. Lucius falls asleep playing music and singing, and Brutus is there reading whatever he was reading. And meanwhile, we have Caesar's ghost. Enter Caesar's ghost. Alright, guys, it's Shakespeare. If there was someone who was murdered and their ghost doesn't show up, you should be concerned. So, we have Caesar. He's dead. Obviously. And Brutus doesn't really believe what he sees at first. He says, who comes? I think it is the weakness of mine eyes that shapes this monstrous apparition. It comes upon me. Art thou anything? Art thou some god, some angel, or some devil that maketh my blood cold and my hair to stare? Speak what thou art. So he's freaking out. At first he's like, is it my eyes? No, I don't think it's my eyes. What are you? Angel, devil, good, bad? He can't tell. And he asks it to speak what thou art. Tell me what you are. And Caesar's ghost replies, thy evil spirit, Brutus. He's guilty. Alright, Brutus is feeling super guilty. If you didn't pick up on this until now, you're crazy, because Brutus feels real guilty about all of this. And this is his guilt manifesting. And so basically he asks the ghost when the next time he's going to see him is, and the ghost promises he'll see him at Philippi. So see you at Philippi, buddy, when we come there tomorrow. So, that should give you kind of an ominous feeling. If a ghost of someone you murdered tells you they're going to see you later, probably not going to end well for you. And then Brutus, wakes up and he tries to ask everyone else, hey, did you see that? Did you see that? And, they were all asleep, so they didn't see anything. So he can't really confirm anything, and he's basically like, that's weird, but, I'll go to bed and we'll go to Philippi in the morning. And that's basically how Act 4 ends. So, there's your recap. Finish your packets. Be working on that. Act 5 tomorrow. Alright, bye guys.